The great arena shook with the sound of thousands of alien voices. The crowd was massive, filling the air with noise and energy. They were waiting for the fight to begin. At the center of this huge arena stood a young human man. He looked small. Compared to the walls, compared to the roaring crowd, and compared to the giant who stepped into the ring against him. She was not just any alien. She was over 7 feet tall, her body weighing more than 330 pounds, built with muscle and strength. Her skin was a deep shade of bronze, her hair tied back into heavy braids, and her eyes glowing like molten fire. Every step she took on the stone floor shook the ground. The crowd cheered louder, calling her name Vayara, Vayara. Vayara was known as one of the strongest warriors of her people. Many challengers had fallen before her, broken and humiliated. Today, she looked down at the human with a wide grin, showing sharp teeth that glistened in the arena light. "I'll crush you, human," she roared, her voice echoing like thunder across the arena. She pounded her chest and then raised her massive arms, high, showing her strength. The crowd responded with wild screams and stomping feet. The human's name was Daniel. He was not a warrior, at least not in the same way as Vayara. He had no huge muscles, no thick armor, and no alien strength. He wore simple battle gear given to him by the alien guards. It looked too big on his thin frame, as if it belonged to someone else. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Studied Vayara carefully, every movement, every muscle twitch, every smile that promised destruction. Daniel had not chosen this fight. He was forced into it. The aliens saw him as weak, a small creature from a small planet. To them, this fight was not about fairness, it was about entertainment. He was here to be crushed, to prove the superiority of alien strength. The announcer's voice thundered through the arena. Today, the strongest warrior of the Kravak people, Vayara the Unbroken, will face the human. The way he said the last word made the crowd laugh. To them, human was a joke, a weak species unfit for war. Daniel felt the pressure of 1,000 eyes on him. He could hear the laughter, feel the mockery. But deep inside, something else burned. Fear was there, yes, but also defiance. He refused to be just another victim. He refused to be the weak one they all believed he was. Vayara lowered her massive body into a fighting stance. Her muscles bulged, ready to strike. Her grin widened as she looked at Daniel like a predator eyeing its prey. "You are nothing," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. "I will break you in seconds." Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he tightened the grip on his weapon, a short staff, light and plain, the only thing given to him. Stood tall, his eyes locked. On hers, his silence made the crowd restless. Some shouted insults, others laughed harder, but Vayara noticed his eyes. They did not look afraid, they looked steady. That annoyed her. She wanted him to beg, she wanted him to tremble, but Daniel simply stood there, quiet, calm, as if waiting. The arena master raised his hand high. The crowd fell silent, holding its breath. Then his hand dropped. "Begin." Vayara charged forward like a storm. Her steps shook the ground, her fists swinging with deadly power. She came at Daniel with the speed of a predator, her shadow covering him. The fight had begun. Daniel moved quickly, dodging to the side. The giant fist slammed into the ground where he had been standing, cracking the stone. Dust flew up. The crowd roared with excitement. Vayara turned with surprising speed for her size. Her glowing eyes blazing. She laughed. "Can run, but you cannot hide." She lunged again, swinging wide. Daniel ducked low, rolling across the floor, the edge of her fist just brushing past him. He came up on one knee, his staff ready, his eyes still calm. The crowd loved it. They thought it was only a matter of time. Before the human was crushed. Every close call made them scream louder, but some of them began to notice something strange. Daniel was not panicking. His movements were sharp, controlled. He was studying her, watching every strike. Vayara pounded the floor again, sending another shockwave of strength through the arena. "Stand still, little human. Let me finish this." Daniel smiled faintly for the first time. "You'll have to catch me first." His voice was steady, not shaking, not weak. The alien crowd hissed and booed, angry that the human dared to speak back, but Viara only grew more excited. Good, you have a spark that will make crushing you even sweeter. She leaped forward, both fists raised high. The ground shook as she landed, but again Daniel slipped away, rolling just out of reach. He tapped the end of his staff against her arm as he passed. A light hit, but enough to show he could touch her if he wanted. Viara froze for a second. Her grin faded into a glare. The human had struck her, even if it was only a tap. The crowd gasped, surprised that such a weak creature dared to touch their champion. Daniel stood tall again, his staff in hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're strong," he said, "but strength isn't everything." The arena went silent for a moment. His words hung in the air like a challenge. The crowd didn't know if they should laugh or grow angry. Viara's chest rose and fell as her grin returned, sharper than before. "You think you can teach me, human?" she roared. "Then show me. Show me before I break every bone in your body." The suspense grew heavy. Daniel had survived the first storm of her attacks, shown courage, calmness, and even dared to touch the warrior who crushed dozens before him. The crowd leaned closer, eager to see what would happen next. For the first time, Viara was not thinking about crushing a weakling. She was thinking about the challenge. This fight might not be as simple as she had believed, and deep inside, Daniel knew one thing clearly. This was not just a fight for survival. This was a fight to show the galaxy that humans were not weak. The crowd in the arena had become louder after Daniel's bold move. A human had touched Viara. It was not a real wound, not even close, but for the alien audience it was shocking. Their champion, their mountain of muscle, had been touched by a fragile creature from a small planet. The Krevok people lived for strength. To them, power was everything. The walls of their arena were painted with stories of champions, giants who crushed their enemies, warriors who broke bones with a single strike, and battles where only the strongest survived. This was not a place of fairness. This was a place of dominance. And now, in the very center, a human stood where no human should ever be. Viara's chest rose and fell as she stared at Daniel. Her grin was gone now. Her pride had been touched, just like her arm. The crowd chanted her name, Viara. Why? Viara. Urging her to destroy him, to remind everyone why she was called the Unbroken. Daniel could feel the weight of the arena pressing down on him. The eyes of thousands of aliens burned into his back. He heard laughter, anger, and even some curiosity, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew one truth. If he let fear control him, this fight would end in seconds. Viara's voice shook the walls as she roared, "You dare insult me in my arena? You dare touch me with your stick?" She pounded her fists against her chest. The sound like drums of war.
I will war.
I will show you the meaning of strength. With that, she charged again. The stone floor cracked beneath her feet as her massive body moved with terrifying speed. Daniel dodged to the side, but this time Viara was ready. She swung her arm wide like a tree falling in a storm. The impact of her strike against the ground sent dust flying into Daniel's eyes. He coughed, blinded for a moment, but managed to roll away before her second strike could crush him. The crowd roared with approval at her display of power. Viara lifted both hands high above her head and slammed them down into the ground. The stone cracked, splitting into lines that reached Daniel's feet. He stumbled, barely keeping balance. The crowd screamed in joy. To them, this was strength, the kind that shook the earth, the kind that no human could ever match. They wanted blood, and Viara was ready to give it. Daniel, however, thought differently. To him, strength was not only about muscle. He remembered his father's words back on Earth. Brains can defeat brawn if you keep your head cool. Words echoed in his mind as he blinked away the dust. Viara advanced slowly now, her glowing eyes locked on him. She spread her arms wide as if to block all escape. "You cannot run forever, human. The arena belongs to me. The air, the ground. The fight, everything bends to my will." Daniel stood, his staff in hand, breathing heavily. His chest hurt from rolling and dodging, but his spirit burned brighter. He raised the staff, holding it firmly in both hands. "Maybe," he said, his voice clear. "But this arena is also my stage now." The crowd erupted in boos and laughter. They hated his defiance, but they could not look away. Vayara snarled and lunged forward, this time swinging with both fists. Daniel spun the staff in front of him, blocking one arm and redirecting the force. The impact sent vibrations through his entire body, almost knocking him off his feet. But he used the energy to roll away again, slipping behind her massive form. Quickly, he struck the back of her knee with his staff. It was not enough to hurt her badly, but it made her stumble for half a second. The crowd gasped again. Vayara turned with fury, her braids whipping around her face. "You insect," she bellowed. "You dare make me stumble," Daniel answered simply. "I dare." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Some aliens in the crowd stopped laughing. A few even leaned forward, curious. The human was not crying, not begging, not broken. He was standing tall in the arena of strength. Vayara charged again, but this time Daniel did not only dodge, he spun around her, his small size giving him speed she lacked. He tapped her ribs with the staff, then her shoulder, then the back of her hand. None of these blows were strong enough to truly injure, but they were fast, clever, and they made. One truth clear, the human was not easy prey. The crowd grew restless. Some shouted for Vayara to crush him.
Others shouted in anger
That the human was mocking their champion. Yet a few voices whispered something else: respect. Vayara raised her, fifth high, her voice booming, "Enough." The sound silenced even the crowd for a moment. Her chest heaved, her muscles tensed, and her glowing eyes narrowed into sharp lines. "You fight like a worm, dodging, running, tapping, but you cannot win. You cannot defeat me with tricks." She pointed at Daniel with a finger as thick as his arm. "I am strength, I am power, and I will show you why no human can ever stand in my arena." Daniel tightened his grip on his staff. His body ached, his lungs burned, but his mind was clear, met her gaze and said, "Then prove it." The crowd screamed again, louder than before. This was no longer just a fight, it was a clash of beliefs. Alien strength against human spirit. The arena itself seemed alive with energy. Vayara lowered into her stance again, her fists ready, her muscles shining with sweat. Daniel stood tall, his staff raised, his heart beating fast but steady. The next round of their battle was about to begin. For the first time, even Vayara felt something unusual, a thrill she had not known in years. This was no longer just a fight to crush a weakling. This was becoming a real challenge. The arena of strength had turned into something greater, a test of what truly defined power. The arena floor was cracked and broken from Vayara's furious strikes. Dust hung in the air, glowing in the bright alien lights above. The chants of the Krivak crowd shook the stadium walls. They wanted destruction, they wanted blood, and they believed only one outcome was possible: Vayara, standing tall while the human lay broken at her feet. But Daniel was still standing. His chest rose and fell with every breath. His arms ached from blocking her blows, and sweat ran down his face. Yet his eyes remained sharp, calm, and full of fire. Vayara growled, circling him like a beast hunting prey. Her huge body glistened with sweat, her powerful muscles twitching with energy. She was enjoying this more than she expected. The human had lasted longer than anyone thought possible. "You are stubborn, little man," she said, her deep voice rolling across the arena. "But stubbornness will not save you. Weak flesh breaks, no matter how brave the spirit." Daniel did not answer right away, simply shifted his staff in his hands, testing his grip, feeling its weight. His mind replayed every moment of the fight, the way she swung, the way her balance shifted, the seconds between her attacks. He was learning, slowly but surely. Finally, he spoke. "Maybe my flesh breaks," he said, his voice low but steady. "But spirit doesn't. You can't crush that." The crowd laughed at his words, mocking him. To them, talk of spirit was weakness. Power was all that mattered. Vayara laughed too, though there was something different in her laugh now. It was not only arrogance, it was also recognition. The human was not afraid to speak back. She roared and charged forward again, her heavy footsteps making the ground tremble. Daniel rolled to the side, narrowly escaping her crushing blow. He spun his staff and jabbed it against her ribs again, this time harder. The wood cracked slightly, but the strike made Vayara grunt in irritation. The crowd gasped. For the third time, the human had struck their champion. Small hits, yes, but hits nonetheless. Daniel backed away, breathing hard. His body screamed in pain, but his mind whispered, "Stay calm. Keep moving. Watch her." Vayara's eyes narrowed. "You think you can sting me like an insect and call it victory?" she said, her voice full of fury. She flexed her arms, her massive muscles bulging like boulders. "Let me show you real power." She stomped hard on the arena floor. The shockwave knocked Daniel off balance, and in that split second, she grabbed him by the arm. Her hand was like iron, crushing his shoulder with unbearable force. Daniel gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. The crowd cheered wildly, believing the fight was finally over. Vayara lifted him off the ground with one hand, his feet dangling in the air. She held him up for everyone to see. "This is your human," she roared. "Fragile, weak, breakable." She began to squeeze harder, the pressure making Daniel's vision blur. But even as pain shot through his body, Daniel's mind refused to surrender. He remembered the faces of the aliens laughing when he was thrown into this fight. He remembered the guards calling him worthless. He remembered the weight of being treated as nothing more than prey, and deep inside, a hidden fire blazed. With a sudden movement, Daniel swung his staff upward with both hands, striking Vayara's wrist. The force surprised her enough that her grip loosened for a second. He twisted free and dropped to the ground, rolling away before she could grab him again. The crowd gasped in shock as the human had escaped. Daniel stood holding his staff tightly, his chest heaving with exhaustion. His arm throbbed with pain from her crushing grip, but he lifted it anyway. His voice cut through the air, strong and clear. "I am not weak. Not today." For the first time, silence spread across the arena. The aliens stared at the small figure standing tall before their champion. His words carried something they were not used to hearing: defiance, courage, and unbroken spirit. Vayara's glowing eyes widened slightly. She had expected him to beg, to break, to fall into despair. Instead, he looked stronger now than before. "You," she whispered, almost to herself, "you fight with more than your body?" Daniel's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "Exactly." Her eyes blazed again, but this time with something more than anger. There was respect hidden beneath the fire. Still, she would not admit it yet. "Then show me this spirit, human," she bellowed, pounding her chest. "Show me before I crush it out of you." Daniel lowered into his stance, his staff steady in his hands. His legs trembled from fatigue, but his heart was steady. He knew he could not overpower her muscles. He could not outrun her forever. He had something else: patience, intelligence, an unyielding will. The crowd began to chant again, but the sound had changed. Before, they had only shouted Vayara's name. Now, mixed in the thunder, were new voices calling out something strange. They shouted, "Human." It was faint, only a few voices at first, but it grew louder as more aliens joined. They were not cheering for his strength, but for his spirit. Vayara noticed it too. Her teeth clenched, her pride burning hotter. She could not allow this human to steal her arena, to steal her crowd. She rushed forward again, faster than before, her fists flying like hammers. Daniel dodged, blocked, and rolled. Every movement cost him strength. Every dodge drained his energy, but his mind remained sharp. He struck when he could, quick taps to her arms and legs, forcing her to adjust, making her angry. The battle was no longer one of size. It had become a battle of will's alien pride against human spirit by the end of the round. Both fighters stood facing each other, their bodies bruised and sweaty, their breaths heavy. The arena floor was covered in cracks, dust, and broken stone. The crowd was split between cheers for Vayara and chants for the human. Daniel wiped blood from his lip, his staff still steady in his hands. "I don't care how strong you are," he said. "I won't kneel. I won't break." Vayara's chest rose and fell as she stared at him, her eyes blazing. For the first time in years, she felt the thrill of a true fight. And in her heart, though, she would never say it aloud, she felt the stirrings of respect for the fragile human who refused to fall. The hidden spirit of humanity had revealed itself, and the galaxy would never forget it. The arena was no longer filled only with laughter and mockery. Now it shook with divided voices, half shouting Vayara's name, half chanting for the human. Dust swirled around the broken floor, and the heavy alien sun above burned like fire on their backs. Daniel stood with his staff gripped tightly in his hands. His arm ached from where Vayara had nearly crushed it. His legs trembled from exhaustion, but his eyes remained steady.
Across from him stood Vayara, the warrior of the Krebak, her body massive and shining with sweat. Her chest heaved as she
glared at the small human who had dared to last this long. "You are still standing," she said slowly, her deep voice carrying across the arena. "I crushed war beasts bigger than you, broke champions stronger than you, yet you still breathe. Why?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "Because strength is more than muscle." The crowd hissed at his words. To them this was an insult to their way of life. But Vayara tilted her head slightly. For the first time, she did not laugh. She looked at him as if studying something strange, something new. Then she roared, pounding her chest so hard, the sound echoed like thunder. "Then show me, human. Show me your strength of spirit, and I will show you the true meaning of power." She charged forward faster than before. Her heavy feet slammed into the ground, cracking the stone. Her fists came down like hammers. Daniel dodged to the left, rolling across the floor, the wind from her strike brushing his face. The ground split where her fist landed, dust exploding upward. Daniel came up on one knee and jabbed his staff at her side, aiming for the spot between her ribs. The wood cracked against her armor-like flesh, forcing a grunt from her throat. The crowd roared with shock. The human had struck again. Vayara snarled and spun, swinging her massive arm like a tree trunk. Daniel ducked low, feeling the air rush above his head. He rolled forward, striking the back of her leg with his staff. She stumbled for a moment, her knee bending under the surprise attack. The crowd gasped again. Vayara roared in fury, turning on him. "You fight like a shadow. You hide, you dodge, you sting. Fight me with strength if you dare." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "No," he said simply. "I fight with what I have." "You want me to fight your way because that's the only way you win?" His words cut through the air like a blade. The crowd hissed angrily, but some voices began to cheer louder for him. For them, this was no longer just a fight. It was a story. A clash of two worlds. Vayara roared and slammed both fists down again. Daniel leaped back, but the shockwave caught him this time. The ground cracked beneath his feet, and he stumbled. Vayara took the chance, swinging her huge hand forward like a claw. Her fingers closed around his torso, lifting him into the air again. She squeezed, her muscles bulging, her teeth bared. "I told you, little human," she growled.
a muscle
"Always wins." Daniel's breath caught in his chest. Pain shot through his ribs, and black spots danced before his eyes. But his mind did not break. With one hand, he twisted his staff and jammed it against the side of her neck. It was not enough to hurt her badly, but it forced her head to tilt for just a second. That second was all he needed, using the leverage of his staff. Daniel twisted his body, slipping out of her grip and dropping to the ground. He rolled came up fast and spun his staff in a wide arc, striking her across the wrist. The force made her grunt in pain, her fingers loosening. The crowd exploded with noise, half furious, half amazed. The human had escaped again. Daniel stood tall, breathing hard, sweat and blood mixing on his face. "You can crush bones," he said between breaths, "but you can't crush wit." Vayara froze. Her chest rose and fell, her glowing eyes burning. with fury, but also with something else, curiosity. No one had ever spoken to her like this in the arena. No one had ever dared challenge her, not with muscle, but with mind. You fight with tricks, she said, almost to herself, but they work. She shook her head violently, growling, no. No. I will not lose to tricks. I will not lose. To a human? She roared, and came at him again, her fists swinging, her steps like earthquakes. Daniel moved like water, dodging, blocking, redirecting. Every hit he avoided, every counter he struck, told the crowd something new. Strength was not the only path to victory. At one moment, she lunged forward, trying to crush him under her massive weight. Daniel rolled aside and she slammed into the stone wall, cracking it deeply. The crowd gasped, stunned that she had missed. Daniel stood, raising his staff once more. His body was broken and tired, but his spirit blazed like fire. He shouted, loud enough for all to hear, strength is nothing without control. Power is nothing without mind. You call me weak, but I fight smarter than you. The arena fell silent. The aliens stared in disbelief. A human was lecturing their champion in her own arena. Vieira turned slowly, her chest heaving, her fists trembling. Her pride was wounded, but deep inside she felt something new: respect. She would not admit it, not yet, but she felt it. For the first time, she realized this human was not just surviving, he was fighting. He was truly fighting. The clash of power and wit had begun, and the outcome was no longer certain. The arena floor looked like a battlefield now. Cracks spread across the stone, dust floated in the air, and broken pieces of rock lay scattered. The chanting of the Krevok crowd was louder than ever, filling the air with thunderous energy. Half shouted for Vieira, their champion, and half shouted for the human who refused to fall. Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His staff shook slightly in his hands from exhaustion, but his grip remained firm. His body hurt everywhere. It's sore from her crushing grip, arms trembling from blocking her blows, and legs burning from constant dodging. Yet his spirit was untouched. Across from him, Vieira stood like a mountain, sweat dripping down her bronze skin, her massive chest heaving. She glared at Daniel, but her glowing eyes were no longer filled with only anger. There was something else there now, something she could not easily admit in certainty. You should be broken, she said, her deep voice booming. I hit you, I crushed you, I threw you, and still you stand. Why? Daniel wiped blood from the corner of his mouth and straightened his posture. He met her eyes without fear. Because I refused to kneel. Because strength is more than muscle, the crowd hissed, their culture offended by his words. To the Krevok, power was everything. Muscles, size, dominance, those were the only truths. But here was a fragile human standing tall against their champion, defying their beliefs. Vieira growled, stepping closer. You dare mock me in my own arena? You dare speak like an equal? She raised her fists, muscles bulging the ground, shaking under her feet. I will show you what happens when walls are tested, she charged, her roar echoing. Daniel moved quickly, rolling to the side and striking her leg again with his staff. The hit forced her knee to bend for a second, making her stumble. The crowd gasped. But Vieira caught herself, spinning with surprising speed for her size. Her arm swung wide, smashing into Daniel's chest. He flew backward, hitting the cracked wall with a painful thud. The breath rushed from his lungs as he fell to one knee, coughing. The crowd roared with joy, convinced it was over. But Daniel forced himself to stand again. He gripped his staff tightly and took a step forward. His body screamed to give up. But his spirit pushed him on. Vieira stared at him, her grin fading into something colder. Why won't you break? She whispered, more to herself than to him. Daniel's voice was weak, but steady. Because walls are made to fall, even yours. Her eyes widened. She understood he was not talking about the stone walls of the arena. He was talking about the walls inside, heard the pride, the arrogance, the belief that strength was everything. She roared in fury, rushing him again. Daniel braced himself, dodging and blocking as best he could. Her fists slammed into the ground, the walls, the floor, each strike sending tremors through the arena. But Daniel kept moving, refusing to stop. Finally, she cornered him against the cracked wall. Her shadow fell over him as she raised her massive fist high. "This ends now," she shouted. The crowd cheered, expecting the final blow. But Daniel did something no one expected. He dropped his staff. The crowd gasped. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Viera froze, her fists still in the air. "What are you doing, human?" she demanded. Daniel looked up at her, his face bloody, his body weak, but his eyes burning with fire. "If strength is all you care about, then hit me, crush me, prove yourself. But know this, if you do, you win nothing, because real strength is not about breaking others. It's about rising again and again, even when the world wants you down." His words echoed through the arena. The crowd went silent. For the first time, they were not laughing or mocking. They were listening. Viera's fists trembled. Her chest rose and fell as she looked at him, truly looked at him. This small human, broken and bleeding, still stood tall before her. He had no armor, no giant muscles, no alien power, but he had something her people had forgotten, a spirit that refused to kneel. For a long moment she hesitated. The walls inside her shook. She remembered every fight she had ever won, every opponent she had crushed. None of them made her feel like this. None of them had stood back up after being broken. None of them had challenged her pride, her belief, her very way of life. Slowly, she lowered her fist. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Daniel stared at her, his body swaying but his voice steady. "You see now? Power is not only in your fists, it's here." He tapped his chest weakly. "It's spirit. And you can't crush that." The silence in the arena was heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Viera's eyes burned, but not with anger, something she had not felt in years. Respect. Her walls were breaking. She stepped back slowly, lowering her arms. You are not like the others," she said, her voice quieter, almost thoughtful. "You fight with more than muscle. You fight with something I cannot crush." The crowd erupted in chaos. Some screamed in outrage, furious that their champion had hesitated. Others cheered wildly, moved by the human's unyielding spirit. The arena had never witnessed such a battle, one that tested not only strength, but pride and belief. Daniel bent down and picked up his staff again. His hands shook, his body weak, but he stood tall. He looked at Viera and said, "Maybe you're the strongest body here, but strength of spirit, that belongs to me." The words hit her harder than any strike ever had. She clenched her fists, staring at him, her chest heaving. Inside her, something had cracked open. A wall had fallen. For the first time, Viera no longer saw him as prey. She saw him as a warrior. And the fight, though not yet over, had already changed forever. The arena that once thundered only with laughter and roars was now divided. Dust swirled through beams of alien light, falling like mist over the cracked floor. The crowd screamed in two voices, one half demanding Viera finish the fight, the other half chanting the impossible. Human. Human. Daniel stood in the center, his body bruised and battered, his chest burned with every breath. His ribs ached where Viera had squeezed him, and blood stained his lip. His staff trembled slightly in his grip, yet his eyes never wavered. He stood tall, even as the weight of exhaustion tried to pull him down. Viera faced him across the arena. Her huge body glistened with sweat, her breathing heavy, her muscles quivering with effort. She had fought hundreds of battles, crushed dozens of challengers, and yet none of them had ever forced her this far. None of them had ever forced her to question herself, but this human had. "You should have broken long ago," she said, her deep voice echoing in the silence that briefly fell. "You are small, you are weak, and yet—" She stopped, clenching her fists. Her glowing eyes narrowed, but they no longer burned, only with anger. "You refuse to fall." Daniel lifted his staff and planted its end firmly on the cracked stone. "Because I don't fight only with my body," he said, his voice rough but steady. I fight with something you cannot see, something you cannot crush. Bayara tilted her head, her braids swinging. Your spirit, she said softly, almost like admitting a truth she did not want to face. The crowd hissed at the word. Spirit was not something the Kravak valued. They honored strength, power, muscle. To them, spirit was weakness. Yet here, before their eyes, spirit had kept a fragile human standing against their champion. Daniel nodded, his chest heaving. Yes, spirit. For a long moment, the two warriors stared at each other. The silence was heavy, the air tense. Every alien in the arena leaned forward, waiting to see what would happen. Then Vieira roared and rushed at him again, her fists raised high. The ground shook with every step, the air filled with the sound of her fury. Daniel braced himself, his staff ready, but when she swung her fist, he did not dodge this time. Instead, he stepped forward, sliding under her arm, and struck the side of her ribs with all the force he had left. The staff cracked loudly against her body. She staggered, her balance broken for a moment. The crowd gasped, their voices rising. In shock, Daniel pulled back, his body shaking, but his eyes still locked on hers. Even the strongest wall can be shaken, he said. Veyara's eyes widened. She touched her ribs where the staff had struck. It did not truly hurt, her body was far too strong for that, but it had forced her to stumble. And that stumble burned more than any wound. She looked at him with new eyes. You're no longer as prey, no longer as a weakling, but as a fighter. Slowly, she straightened, her fists lowering. Her chest rose and fell, and her voice, when she spoke, carried something strange, something the crowd had never heard from her before. Human, she said, her tone steady. You have earned something rare. She paused, her glowing eyes locked on his. You have earned my respect. The arena erupted in chaos. Some aliens screamed in outrage, demanding their champion crush the human. Others shouted with excitement, thrilled by the unexpected twist. Respect was not something easily given by the Kravak, never to a human. Daniel blinked, surprised, but he kept his stance ready. Respect? He asked carefully. Vieira nodded once, her massive frame towering over him. Yes, you fought. With courage, you fought with wit. You stood against me when no one else could. You did not break. The words echoed through the arena. Even the announcer, who had mocked Daniel at the start, was silent now. Daniel exhaled, gripping his staff tighter to keep himself steady. Then you see it now, he said. Humans are not weak. Not if we refuse to kneel. Veyara's lips curved into the faintest grin, not mocking, but real. Yes, I see. She stepped back, pounding her chest once, but this time it was not in arrogance. It was in salute. The crowd roared, confused, excited, furious. The division in their voices grew louder, half demanding blood, half calling for honor. Daniel lowered his staff slowly, though he did not drop it. His body trembled, every muscle crying out for rest. Yet he stood, facing her without fear. Veyara studied him, then raised her voice for all to hear. This human has fought with honor. He has shown spirit beyond measure. In my arena I call him warrior. The words crashed through the arena like thunder. Gasps, cries, shouts, every alien reacted. Some could not believe it. Some were furious. But many were moved. Daniel's chest tightened. Not from pain this time, but from something else, pride. He had come into this fight as prey, as entertainment. But now, standing in the center of the Kravak arena, he had been called something he never expected, warrior. Veyara stepped closer, towering above him. She looked down, her glowing eyes softening slightly. Do not mistake this, she said, her voice firm. If we fought until the end, I would still crush you. But you have taught me something. You have broken walls I thought unbreakable. Daniel smiled faintly, blood still on his lip. And you've shown me that even the strongest can learn. Her grin widened, sharp teeth glistening. Perhaps. The crowd's roar shook the arena again, but their voices no longer sounded the same. Something had changed forever. Respect had been born. And the fight, though not over, was no longer just about strength. It was about what both of them had discovered inside themselves. The arena, once only a place of blood and dominance, had become something different. The stone floor was broken, dust covered the air, and the crowd was louder than ever. The sound was not the same as before. It was divided. Half still cried for Vayara to crush the human, but the other half shouted his name. Human, human. Daniel stood tall in the center, his staff resting against the cracked floor. His body shook with exhaustion, his chest burned with every breath, and his clothes were torn. Yet his eyes still burned with spirit. He had not fallen, not even when the world demanded it. Vayara, the mountain of muscle, stood across from him. Her bronze skin was wet with sweat, her chest rising and falling heavily, her braids hanging loose from the battle. Her glowing eyes stayed locked on Daniel. But those eyes no longer saw a weakling, they no longer saw prey. For the first time in her warrior life, she saw an equal. "You are no longer only human to me," she said, her deep voice carrying across the arena. "You are warrior." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some screaming in outrage. Respect was rare in Krivak culture. For their champion to give it to a human was unheard of. Daniel tightened his grip on his staff, still unsure if the fight was truly over. "If I am a warrior," he said slowly, "then what happens now? Do we keep fighting until one of us falls?" Vayara's grin widened, but this time it carried no arrogance. "If we fought until the end, I would break you," she admitted, her tone blunt but honest. "But it would not matter, because your spirit has already proven what your body could not." Daniel lowered his staff, his arms trembling with fatigue. He gave her a small nod. "Then maybe this fight has already ended." The crowd booed and roared, demanding more. They wanted to see blood, to see final victory. But Vayara raised her huge arms and silenced them with a thunderous roar. Enough. The stadium fell quiet at her command. Her voice was powerful, unshakable, the voice of a champion. "This human," she said, pointing at Daniel, "stood against me longer than any beast or warrior. He bled, he stumbled, but he never knelt. His body is weak, but his spirit is unbreakable, and for that I honor him." The silence that followed was heavy. Then, slowly, the crowd erupted, not only with anger, but with awe. For the Krivak's strength was everything. But here, before their eyes, their champion was declaring something new, that spirit mattered too. Daniel looked up at her, his lip bloody, his chest aching, but his heart steady. "And I honor you," he said, "because without your strength, I would not have found mine." For a moment, the two warriors simply looked at one another. The arena, the crowd, the dust, all of it seemed to fade. There was no human, no alien, only two fighters who had tested each other, broken each other, discovered something greater in the clash. Vayara stepped forward, her shadow falling over Daniel. The crowd leaned forward, certain she would crush him at last. But instead, she slammed her massive fist against her chest in salute. Daniel hesitated, then copied the gesture with his free hand, striking his own chest. The crowd gasped at the sight. In that moment, enemies had become allies. The announcer, who had mocked Daniel at the start, could barely find words. His voice shook as he shouted, for the first time in Krivak history, "The human is called warrior." The crowd thundered, some in anger, some in cheers, but all in recognition. Something had changed forever. Daniel dropped his staff at last, his strength nearly gone. His knees trembled, but he forced himself to stay upright. He would not fall now, not after all he had endured. Vayara looked down at him, her grin sharp. "But not cruel. You will heal," she said. "But the galaxy will never forget this day. A human stood in my arena, and he did not break." Daniel gave her a tired smile. "And I will never forget the alien who taught me that strength is more than fists." Her deep laugh echoed through the broken arena. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is more." The crowd continued to roar, but Daniel barely heard it. His vision blurred with exhaustion, his body finally giving in. As he swayed, Vayara reached out her massive hand not to crush him, but to steady him. The image burned itself into every eye in the arena. The alien giant holding the human warrior, not as prey, but as ally. When Daniel finally collapsed, it was not in defeat. It was in victory. Aftermath's word of the battle spread beyond the arena. Across Kravok worlds, the story was told again and again. The day their champion fought a human who refused to kneel. Some mocked it, others denied it, but many began to wonder. Perhaps strength was not only muscle. Perhaps spirit mattered too. For Vayara, the battle broke more than stone, it broke the walls inside her. She had always believed power was everything. Now she knew there was another kind of power, one she could not crush. And for Daniel, the fight proved something he had always believed deep inside, that humanity's greatest weapon was not size or strength, but the will to rise again and again, no matter how impossible the odds. The arena had started with enemies. It ended with allies, and the galaxy would remember it forever.